Welcome to the DeFi Standard, and this is Mickey B. Fresh. Today we're talking about the reemergence of Codius. So a couple days ago, Stefan Thomas put out a tweet talking about how Codius was being brought back. And anyone who's followed me or followed my research or followed these videos knows that it was always in the plans to be used and already is being used. That most of you already know. But for those who aren't aware, how does Codius affect Flare? How does it affect that Flare network and Ethereum smart contracts that are being built on there? So we're going to go through a couple different clips today and a couple different screenshots. But first, let's see what Stefan Thomas said here about Codius recently. So this was on April 30th. He says, I believe that interledger is a prerequisite. But as ILP becomes established, Codius will emerge as a far superior way to implement most smart contracts compared to ledger-locked approaches like ETH 1.0, 2.0, and XRP hooks. So now, what does that mean? Ledger-locked. So ledger-locked means smart contracts only exist on, say, Ethereum network. They don't exist outside of that. That network can't communicate with any other networks, only through oracles, which then you got to trust that oracle. Now, Flare is also a ledger lock solution, but there are applications that are obviously being utilized that are massive, like DeFi, for example. So Flare is going to capture basically those ledger locked applications that are being built on Ethereum will be able to be built on Flare in a much more efficient way. But this Codius is something bigger. It's got a bigger vision than just doing DeFi. It does not have a token attached to it. It can be configured in many different ways. It's not a smart contract platform. It's a hosting protocol. All right? And I think that's something that community has really had a difficult time trying to comprehend. And there's a lot of people trying to say things are dead. They're not dead. Okay? So this video will clear a lot of that up. I mean, it's just some things are just facts. So Codius, FAAS, stands for Function as a Service. All right, I'm not going to get too deep into that today. I want to go through and give everyone a refresher on Codius so that as the applications and configurations and all announcements come out in the future, you're aware of what it is and how it works, so then you know how it'll be used. So it won't be a big surprise when it comes out. I'll link these in the descriptions below, but let's move over here before we go over to video clips about what the Flare CTO said about Codius. This is back in 11/5/2019. So over 2 years ago, so almost 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. We think of Codius as an infrastructure provider option, like AWS or GCP, which is Google's hosting service. So Codius is always an option to deploy a Flare node to. Flare is a virtual machine agnostic. We're particularly big fans of Agoric, though in terms of future support. So this is how Flare nodes can be hosted using Codius protocol. Now, also in the Flare ecosystem, so this is a year and a half old. So since then, things have developed in Flare. There's different components now and entities. You have these signal providers, which are oracles, right? That sit outside the network and they provide data to the Flare network through the Flare time series oracle. They could run at Codius hosting software. I mean, that would make sense, and it's definitely a possibility. And what Codius was always able to do was do smart oracles, because it could have smart contracts or crypto conditions with the oracle component of it. Now, also agents. Now, the idea of an agent is holding wallets on both networks. That's exactly what Codius was designed to do. So there's another use case that possibly you could see Codius where they interact with Flare, but it's complementary. It's not competition of. Codius kind of is higher level, higher layer contracts above these blockchains. It's not ledger locked solutions, and it uses any virtual machine, depending how it's configured. It could be configured for a private network, like, for example, Ripplenet or Polysign. So we have pretty hard evidence here that I've been saying this for a while, that Ripplenet they don't necessarily advertise that it has smart contracts and all that capabilities, but it absolutely has all those capabilities. So here from the 2016 Codius website, this is on the front page of Codius. It's not there anymore. This is from Wayback Machine, 2016, Codius.org, right on the front page. What does it say? Codius is used by Ripple Labs for banking and enterprise integrations. Now, When you hear Ripplenet cloud and you hear hosting, that's Codius, okay? It doesn't take rocket science to really connect these together. But finding this was hard evidence to prove that. And Codius applications can pay each other using a built-in micropayment system. So the fact that the applications and smart contracts have to be executed, the hosts have to be paid, that's where interledger comes in. It allows the paying for these hosts. I'm not exactly sure how it's used on Ripplenet. I mean, there could be a multitude of different ways between the exchanges, the liquidity providers, the payments. I mean, it's basically on top of interledger. We knew Xcurrent was part of interledger, but then you have Codius over there. You got the different price quotes, all these different things. Ripplenet uses, and Ripple uses Codius in a proprietary way on Ripplenet and has been using it that way for some time. Either an evolution of it, an enhanced version of it, a custom version, it's still based off of Codius. That's the bottom line here. It was always one of the most powerful technologies that they had. So let's go into some of the clips that I have from a while back. And now these, certain things that you look back to that are old information are very relevant, but not everything. And I pick out the things that are relevant to today because the vision has always been the same. It's just taken more time, and certain things need to be built first. So let's move into here. This is from, I think 2014. You got Chris Larson here. You got this guy in the middle. He's from a custodian, crypto custodian. And then you got Greg Kidd over here to the left. And now he's talking about Stefan Thomas inventing Codius. But it's not just Codius. Here's the misunderstanding. And I'm going to do a whole separate video on this because it's just too much to unpack in one video. And it's going to go over people's heads. But crypto conditions. Remember that phrase, crypto conditions, is a really special type of cryptography where they do multi-layer, multi-algorithm, and multi-signature to create these different kinds of conditions. And they didn't build it into interledger, but it was used, for example, in the Bank of England proof of concept when they went from 7 different ledgers. All of that was using crypto conditions on top of interledger. Now they made it its own standard at the IETF. Crypto conditions is a standard. We're going to do a separate video on that. But that's what he's talking about here. The combination of crypto conditions inside of Codius, which is like smart contracts, just between ledgers, and for a specific use case of payments. So listen to what he says about Codius.
Generalized Codius is pretty remarkable. In fact, I'm very familiar with cryptography, and there are very few people that know more about cryptography than that I run into. And Stefan really is created this incredible, that he exploited some techniques that very few people know about in creating Codius. So from a technology point of view, it's like a 10 compared to if you consider ACH being a 1. I mean, it's so far advanced. So I mean, it's really remarkable in terms of what you can do with it and the underlying technology that it's built upon. It's really tour de force.
But do you notice there how he compares it to ACH? Just notice that. I think that's very important to the previous slide that I just showed, how Codius is used on Ripplenet. Okay? So it's part of the whole Xcurrent ODL thing. It's all in that mix. When you hear Ripplenet Cloud, hosting solutions, that's like the evolution of Codius. These are the early days. All right, now let's move on to some others. Now this was a clip from a couple years ago talking about how Codius was going to connect all the blockchains together.
That have made Codius are absolute geniuses. So, what it's going to enable to do is all the current blockchains will be able to come together. So the GCR blockchain, the Litecoin blockchains, the BTC blockchains will all be able to operate on the one blockchain, as well as all of your banks, businesses, your markets, even the Forex and the Fortune 500 businesses, everything like that. So all of your standard stock exchanges will operate on the Codius networks. Basically, it's set up to run everything on the one blockchain because it accepts every blockchain. So
one thing, if you did catch there, it sounds a lot like what he's describing is Flare. And I do think that Flare was inspired by Codius. I mean, they say that in the Interledger Summit. I'm not going to play the video now, but the guys from Flare say we were inspired from certain aspects of Codius. So the vision of like this was early days. I think this was 5 years ago at least. Them saying this was 6 years ago. That some of that vision was broken up as Ethereum got bigger. You could see that these ledger-locked blockchains and smart contract networks did have power, and they did have applications and use cases. So it's like Codius's vision was broken out into many different ways. And I think Flare was designed to bridge all these legacy blockchains. I guess we could call them Bitcoin, Litecoin, XLM, XRP. They don't have native smart contract capability. And that's not bad. It's just that they're used for different purposes, especially XRP. It doesn't need smart contracts in it because it's going to have things like Codius above it doing all the smart contracts and all the hosting solutions. So it didn't need that. That's why they left that out. So let's move on here. I'm going to skip that one. And Stefan Thomas talks about this middleware layer that's going to connect everything together.
It seems really silly to try and build programmability into the database. It's like trying to write all your software in SQL. Right? It's like it's not something that you normally do, but rather you would have some sort of middleware layer. But there's no such thing for cryptocurrencies. We're like, that's what we want to build. That's a missing link, right? Building a business logic layer like the Node.js for decentralized applications, right? Some place where it can query anything, it can interact with any system, it can be decentralized itself, and then it uses consensus ledgers in order to coordinate its actions.
See how he said
really silly
under there that it uses consensus ledgers underneath to coordinate itself. That's crypto conditions. So it's Codius plus crypto conditions. So that's, he's talking about the missing link between the middleware here, but I'm talking about the missing link is that crypto conditions was the missing piece that just didn't make it. Codius by itself didn't really add up to do everything. Crypto conditions plus Codius plus interledger. That's the magic. And that's where I think we're going to see PolySign come in, aspects of Flare come out, and others. So here's another one talking about bridging ledgers and wallets together. So we know wallets has been a thing that we have all these different wallets. How are you going to connect them all together? So this is one thing. This is from years ago, and Evan Schwartz talking about it.
Started thinking about was this way of what if you took this layer out of the distributed network, then you get this interesting effect where you can actually start bridging between, having automatic bridges between different cryptocurrencies and things like that, or wallets that can hold money on different blockchains. And so we started thinking about it more in that way, and that was the genesis of the Codius idea. So I've been working on that for the past 6 months or so.
So see how this has evolved from back then, but the concept was still the same. What they're trying to do. Automatic bridges between network. That's what Flare's doing with the agents. You're not trusting an agent when you mint FXRP. Like, we definitely got to move past that. I've seen a lot of that on Twitter. Absolutely not what's going on here. It's a trustless system. They're automatic. You always have a claim back to the XRP. It's fully trustless. You're not trusting any agent. Okay? I just want to make that clear. I've been seeing that a lot. And now, on to Codius with derivatives and how it can be used. And now we get Susan Athey talking about it. And we know that a lot of people have said XRP's ultimate market is derivatives. Well, that's a long ways away. And derivatives are going to look very different in the future than they look now. So it's hard to say, oh, XRP will do all derivatives. Well, what are derivatives going to look like in the future when there's tokenization and all these DeFi applications? Derivatives are going to be very different. Derivatives are going to happen right on Flare. And as you get security tokens, real estate tokenization, and other assets and commodities that are tokenized, you could create all types of new derivatives. But to do that, you need the data. Having that accurate data is important, and also just data provisioning in general. So that's where Flare comes in, and also what's being built on Ripplenet. So let's hear what Susan Athey has to say about derivatives and Codius.
Codius platform would allow you to write a program, and it'll make it easy for people to verify the program works, that would say, if these 5 things happen, then this person gets paid. If these other 3 things happen, this other person gets paid. So we could just, for example, you could think about some sort of complex financial derivative. We could take as an input the Bloomberg feed of stock prices, And we could make very complex bets about, well, if this stock goes up and this stock goes down and this other thing happens and the National Weather Service says it's sunny today, then this person gets paid. And if these other things happen, someone else gets paid. So that's going to really reduce the barriers to entry for creating financial derivative products, and it's going to allow more people to hedge more complicated situations where there's not enough people right now to make the market worthwhile to create the asset and have it verified.
So what she explains right there is some of the things that are happening in Flare. And she also describes crypto conditions when she says, if this thing happens and this thing happens, then this person gets paid. That's what crypto conditions is. And like functions as a service, those are different functions. And if certain conditions are met, then it does certain things. And I just want to say, this is kind of speculation, but I really believe this a lot. This is how the escrow release works, everybody. This is how it works. It gets released out of the XRP ledger's locked escrow. It gets released to a multi-sig wallet. Then it hits these smart programs, and different conditions have to be met, and it gets released based upon those different conditions. Now, those conditions can be certain price feeds, can be liquidity, can be volume, whatever the set parameters are of those conditions, it will go based on if those conditions are met or not met. And there could be a whole line of them. And you could have different algorithms, different signatures, different layers. It could get very complex. So that's how the escrow is ultimately always going to be released. And I've said this for a while. It's not like there's some guy sitting behind a desk and saying, oh, let's give $200 million to SBI today. No, it's based on certain conditions that are released. And that's how it's going to work in the future. And how they set that up, I don't exactly know, but there's a whole lot they could do with it. But it's important to understand that once it's released from escrow, it's the multi-sig wallet and then the smart programs based on different conditions. And that could be established for all types of ways. I mean, look how it's done on Flare. Flare, out of the general rewards pool, if you mint an F asset, you receive the Spark rewards. That's a condition. If you have F asset there, you receive a percentage of it. So concepts are similar. These are smart contracts, crypto conditions. They kind of overlap a little. All right, and then private blockchains. What I really think at the center of all this Codius talk and these what they call Codius networks or Flare networks, they use this specific video here clip of private blockchains. This, I think, is PolySign, where they're going with it. All right, so listen.
You can more freely choose what the security properties of your system are. And there's a lot of projects now like Cosmos and others that realize this and are building this direction. Where like, okay, let's say I want to have 10 hosts and I want them to be recognized hosting companies, or I want them to be anonymous, or I want them to be globally distributed. I can actually just choose Codius hosts that meet those criteria and have whatever governance process I want for updating that list. Or if I want to have a different kind of system where I want just as many hosts as possible, it doesn't matter if they're secure or not. This could be distributed computing, or it could be a content delivery network where I just care about what's the latency to get the content from the closest node to you. I could use all the hosts or a large number that fits my quality criteria. Or maybe latency is really important, but the quality of the host is also important, and I want to have sort of regional blockchains. And this could be something where, like, hey, I want my transactions to clear in milliseconds instead of in seconds. And so I have a US blockchain, I have a European blockchain, I have an Asian blockchain, and they each can come to consensus more quickly. And then maybe I use some interoperability tool like IBC or interledger to go in between.
Now, that's exactly what's done in Ripplenet. There's different regionals within Ripplenet. All right, you have the Asia, you have this. I'm not exactly sure how it's broken down, but we know from seeing those slides at the Swell regionals that there's regional blockchains or networks within Ripplenet. And they're using the hosting. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious here. The specifics and the details, we don't know. But I'm just giving you an overall of how the technology is already being used. It's already there. So, like, when people say something's like dead, like I laughed for the last year when people said that, because it's obviously already implemented. It's just waiting. The public side and whatever they're doing with RippleX and all that is waiting for interledger network to fully be released. Like these interledger connectors can run Codius hosts and crypto conditions and run smart contracts all across different blockchains and different ledgers. So what we see as smart contracts now is not going to be for the future forever. Like, I think there is a place for networks like Flare and networks like Ethereum. Flare has more capabilities because it interoperates those legacy blockchains and unlocks all that value. There is a specific use case for Flare, which is data provisioning and unlocking all that value. So unlocking all that Litecoin, Bitcoin, XLM, Doge, Zcash, Bitcoin Cash, whatever else comes over to it, XDC, and those that have actual blockchains, native ones, and they can bring that value over here and be used in smart contracts, Ethereum-based. And Ethereum-based smart contracts do have standards, so that is one thing that is important. It is ERC20 based on a lot of the smart contracts. So for DeFi, that's really relevant. But for smart contracts and different distributed applications that connect to the real world and the traditional markets, you don't have to worry about that stuff. So we're just seeing the beginning of the smart contract use. And what Ripple was looking was so far ahead already, where it's machine-to-machine, autonomous transactions, where they just happen automatically. It's just smart programs. All right, so let's listen to the rest of this.
Or maybe I'm literally just, wanting to run like a trusted a system where you don't have to trust me, and I just upload I'll just upload my code to a single host for something like I'm betting with a friend or something like that, where it's not exactly I have to worry about nation state attackers and things like that. And just to explain, you can apply the same.
So you see there, file tokens, ledger, file hosts, ledger, and tokens. So that's where Filecoin comes into the mix here. Because Filecoin, they've talked about a lot, and that's the file hosting. And I think that's really going to be important moving forward in the future, decentralized cloud storage. And even PolySign's original website had the Filecoin logo on it. That was not coincidence. Filecoin wasn't even launched at that time. So just to put that on there, there's those little breadcrumbs and nuggets that are dropped that connect everything together. So it's very likely that PolySign is built using Codius hosts in a private blockchain, like they describe it, in a proprietary way for specific use cases, which I speculate would be more along the lines of authentication and attestation. So we'll see going forward there. I didn't touch on crypto conditions too much in here. I'm going to do a separate video on that because that is complex, it's technical, and it's definitely more difficult to understand. But it is important because that's the missing piece of Codius. Because Codius by itself is just a hosting protocol that can house any type of smart contracts, any type of virtual machine. It can be configured in any type of way with any type of consensus. So you really have to narrow it down of how the use case. Crypto conditions was a way to be able to do that with the interledger. So we will cover that in a future video. I don't know if it'll be this week, maybe next week. We'll dive into crypto conditions. It was part of my PolySign Part 2, which just keep going deeper and deeper with that, and I want to make sure we're connect that back to PolySign. But crypto conditions is pretty much like the secret sauce that has gotten hidden. Even Cardano uses parts of crypto condition. Now this is an IETF standard. What does PolySign say? The standard PolySign multi-signature. Crypto conditions is multi-signature, multi-algorithm, and multi-layer. So it just kind of went under the radar, but it's still a standard with the IETF. And in that video, I'll really dive into it. But keep an eye on Codius. There's nothing investable right now, like from our point of view as being XRP owners and, receiving Spark tokens. There's nothing investable Codius. So we just want to keep an eye on it and see how it's going to be used. The focus still is Flare, is the investment opportunity, and to be able to make yield. So I just do want to separate those things. This is more of like a deep dive, just getting re-familiar with what Codius is going to do. I think it'll have to do with the wallets and definitely with web monetization. So there's active work being done on Coil's website to build this super database that they're doing called Tiger Beetle, and also on the Codius GitHub to build function as a service with Codius hosting protocol. All right, but nothing has been officially released yet. Something just to keep an eye on moving forward in the future. And this coincides with Flare, so it's complementary. What Stefan Thomas said there about hooks is interesting. It's possible that what they're building in Codius might just make hooks irrelevant where it's not needed because all that could be done at a layer above. I don't know. We'll see how that shapes out with Wietse Nguyen and Stefan Thomas and David Schwartz and how they figure things out. But coming down to Ethereum 1.0 and 2.0, between Flare and what they're building with these interledger network, it just makes basically Ethereum 1.0 and 2.0 just redundant. So going forward in the future, the technology will be superior, it'll be faster. You won't be using value to secure the consensus, which is going to be important. After proof of work is stomped out, and I know there's a lot of talk in the community about that, and I believe that proof of work does not have a long-term future, but at the same time, Bitcoin's not going anywhere for right now. But they are going to have to address the changes, and there's no way this new green reset and green deal is going to just let Bitcoin slide. So there is going to have something done there. If anyone picked up, Chris Larson's foundation invested in this renewable, they've invested $35 million into this technology that allows to turn any type of waste into, I think it was methane and then energy. So that was something interesting, kind of slipped under the radar too in his recent interviews. It's not directly related, but it's interesting how they could take waste and then turn it into any type of waste and turn it into energy. So anyways, proof of stake will be the next thing that will be targeted after the proof of work, because then proof of work stake has many inefficiencies on most of those networks because you're tying up value just to secure it. But what happens when there's more value on the network than the native token? That's a problem. That's where it can't scale, and it will hit scaling limits. These institutions are not going to use those proof of stake networks, most of them, when it comes to financial services, derivatives, and putting massive asset tokenization on it. They're not going to put them on the mainnets because of that proof of stake problem, and that's a scaling issue. That's something Flare is, hammering the drum about, and you got at the other side, you got Ripple hammering the drum about proof of work because they both are inefficient. Now, everyone tried to say, okay, Federated Byzantine Agreement is centralized and it lacks certain governance functionalities. Well, Flare solved those problems. One, they added the avalanche, and they bootstrapped off these other blockchains to make it decentralized. And then they added this unique, powerful governance structure through liquid democracy by using that virtual voting machine. So the Flare Time Series Oracle, the governance, the consensus, use something called virtual voting machine. And it's like a superior version of what Hedera Hashgraph uses. And it says that right in the white paper. It's Sybil resistant. So it takes components from Avalanche, Hedera, XRP Ledger, Ethereum. It takes the best and just makes them better. So this is why we're so excited about Flare, and we have to continue to get familiar with it so that when it comes out, we're able to use it. We don't sit back a month or two and wait, because then you miss out on all the big opportunities. The opportunity comes to those who take advantage of it in the beginning, because there will be enough information, and there already is, to know that this is a huge opportunity. All right? And we will cover these further in the future. The only last thing I want to touch on, and I'm not going to go detail into it, is that we will have to wait for Flare Networks to give guidance on the actual whole claim. But it's my understanding that that claim is your full allocation. You have ownership of your whole claim. So it's not like that distribution is going to happen and get dropped to you, over months. It will, but it's your claim. It only goes to one address. If you had it pointed to that one, that's all it could go to. It can't be changed. So it's your ownership of that whole claim. All right, that's just important to understand. I'm not going to go any further there, but that is important. So it's not like you have ownership to all those allocations. So even though they're released, it's your ownership, okay? All right, I'm Mickey B. Fresh, and I'm out.